JoaquíN Archivaldo Guzm Loera Spanish pronunciation, Joaquín Art I Beta Aldo Guzmán Loera, born on the 25th of December 1954 or the 4th of April 1957, is a Mexican drug lord who headed the Sinaloa Cartel, a criminal organization named after the Mexican Pacific Coast state of Sinaloa where it was formed. Each year from 2009 to 2011, Forbes magazine ranked Guzmán as one of the most powerful people in the world, ranking 41st, 60th, and 55th respectively. He was thus the second most powerful man in Mexico, after Carlos Slim. He was named as the 10th richest man in Mexico, 1,140th in the world, in 2011, with a net worth of roughly $1 billion. The magazine also calls him the biggest drug lord of all time. The U.S. federal government considers JoaquíN Guzmán the most ruthless, dangerous, and feared man on the planet, and the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, estimates he has matched the influence and reach of Pablo Escobar, and now considers him the godfather of the drug world. In 2013, the Chicago Crime Commission named Guzmán public enemy number 1 for the influence of his criminal network in Chicago, though there is no evidence that Guzmán has ever been in that city. The last person to receive such notoriety was Al Capone in 1930. Guzmán's Sinaloa Cartel transports multi-ton cocaine shipments from Colombia through Mexico to the United States, the world's top consumer, and has distribution cells throughout the U.S. The organization has also been involved in the production, smuggling and distribution of Mexican methamphetamine, marijuana, ecstasy, MDMA, and heroin across both North America and Europe. By the time of his 2014 arrest, Guzmán had exported more drugs to the United States than anyone else, more than 500 tons, 450,000 kilograms, of cocaine in the U.S. alone. Guzmán was first captured in 1993 in Guatemala, extradited and sentenced to 20 years in prison in Mexico for murder and drug trafficking. After bribing prison guards, he was able to escape from a federal maximum security prison in 2001. He was wanted by the governments of Mexico, United States, and by Interpol. The U.S. offered a $5 million reward for information leading to his capture, and the Mexican government offered a reward of 60 million pesos, approximately $3.8 million. He was arrested a second time by Mexican authorities in Mexico on the 22nd of February 2014. He was found inside a fourth-floor condominium in Mazatlan, Sinaloa, and was captured without any gunshots fired. Guzmán escaped from prison again on the 11th of July 2015 by exiting through a 1.5 kilometers (0.93 miles) tunnel that led to a construction site. He was recaptured by Mexican Marines and federal police following a shootout on the 8th of January 2016. On January 19, 2017, Guzmán was extradited via aircraft to the United States to face criminal charges there related to his leadership of the Sinaloa Cartel. Early life JoaquíN Archivaldo Guzmán Loera was born into a poor family in the rural community of La Tuna, Badiraguato, Sinaloa, Mexico. Sources disagree on the date of his birth, with some stating he was born on the 25th of December 1954, while others report he was born on the 4th of April 1957. His parents were Emilio Guzmán Bustillos and Maria Consuelo Laura Perez. His paternal grandparents were Juan Guzmán and Otilia Bustillos, and his maternal grandparents were Ovidio Laura Cobret and Pomposa Perez Uriarte. For many generations, his family lived and died at La Tuna. His father was officially a cattle rancher, as were most in the area where Guzmán grew up, according to some sources. However, he may have possibly also been a gomero, a Sinaloan word for opium poppy farmer. Guzmán has 2 younger sisters, Armida and Bernarda, and 4 younger brothers, Miguel Angel, Aureliano, Arturo and Emilio. He had 3 unnamed older brothers who reportedly died of natural causes when he was very young. Few details are known of Guzmán's upbringing. As a child, Guzmán sold oranges, and dropped out of school in 3rd grade to work with his father. Guzmán was regularly beaten and sometimes fled to his maternal grandmother's house to escape such treatment. However, when he was home, Guzmán stood up to his father to protect his younger siblings from being beaten. It is possible that Guzmán incurred his father's wrath for trying to stop him from beating them. His mother, however, was the foundation of his emotional support, as the nearest school to his home was about 60 miles, 100 kilometers, away. Guzmán was taught by traveling teachers during his early years, just like the rest of his brothers. The teachers stayed for a few months before moving to other areas. With few opportunities for employment in his hometown, he turned to the cultivation of opium poppy, a common practice among local residents. During harvest season, Guzmán and his brothers hiked the hills of Badiraguato to cut the bud of the poppy. Once the plant was stacked in kilos, his father sold the harvest to other suppliers in Culiacan and Guamuchil. He sold marijuana at commercial centers near the area while accompanied by Guzmán. His father spent most of the profits on liquor and women and often returned home with no money. Tired of his mismanagement, Guzmán, at the age of 15, cultivated his own marijuana plantation with 4 distant cousins, Arturo, Alfredo, Carlos, and Hector, who lived nearby. With his first marijuana productions, Guzmán supported his family financially. When he was a teenager, however, his father kicked him out of his house, and he went to live with his grandfather. It was during his adolescence that Guzmán earned the nickname El Chapo, Mexican slang for shorty, for his 1.68 meters, 5 feet 6 in, stature and stocky physical appearance. Initial stages in organized crime. During the 1980s, the leading crime syndicate in Mexico was the Guadalajara Cartel, which was headed by Miguel Angel Flix Gallardo, alias El Padrino or the Godfather, Rafael Caro Quintero, Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo, alias Don Neto, Juan José Esparagoza Moreno, alias El Azul, the Blue One, and others. In the 1970s, Guzmán first worked for the drug lord Hector El Guero Palma by transporting drugs and overseeing their shipments from the Sierra Madre region to urban areas near the U.S.-Mexico border by aircraft. Since his initial steps in organized crime, Guzmán was ambitious and regularly pressed on his superiors to allow him to increase the share of narcotics that were smuggled across the border. The drug lord also favored a violent and serious approach when doing business. If any of his drug shipments were not on time, Guzmán would simply kill the smuggler himself by shooting him in the head. Those around him learned that cheating him or going with other competitors, even if they offered better prices, was inconvenient. The leaders of the Guadalajara cartel liked Guzmán's business acumen, and in the early 1980s, they introduced him to Flix Gallardo, one of the major drug lords in Mexico at that time. Guzmán first worked as a chauffeur for Flix Gallardo before he put him in charge of logistics, where Guzmán coordinated drug shipments from Colombia to Mexico by land, air, and sea. Palma, on the other hand, made sure the deliveries arrived to consumers in the United States. Guzmán soon earned enough standing and began working for Flix Gallardo directly. Throughout most of the late 1970s and early 1980s, the Mexican drug traffickers were also middlemen for the Colombian trafficking groups, and would transport their cocaine through the U.S.-Mexico border and receive a fee for each kilogram. Mexico, however, remained a secondary route for the Colombians, given that most of the drugs trafficked by their cartels were smuggled through the Caribbean and the Florida corridor. Flix Gallardo was the leading drug baron in Mexico and friend of Juan Ramón Mata Ballesteros, but his operations were still limited by his counterparts in South America. In the mid-1980s, however, the U.S. government increased law enforcement surveillance and put pressure on the Medellin and Cali cartels by effectively reducing the drug trafficking operations in the Caribbean corridor. Realizing it was more profitable to hand over the operations to their Mexican counterparts, the Colombian cartels gave Flix Gallardo more control over their drug shipments. This power shift gave the Mexican organized crime groups more leverage over their Central American and South American counterparts. During the 1980s, however, the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, was conducting undercover groundwork in Mexico, where several of its agents worked as informants. One DEA agent, Enrique Camarena Salazar, was working as an informant and grew close to many top drug barons, including Flix Gallardo. In November 1984, the Mexican military, acting on the intelligence information provided by Camarena, raided a large marijuana plantation owned by the Guadalajara cartel and known as Rancho Búfalo. Angered by the suspected betrayal, Flix Gallardo and his men sought revenge by kidnapping, torturing, and killing the DEA agent in February 1985. The death of Camarena outraged Washington, and Mexico responded by carrying out a massive manhunt to arrest those involved in the incident. Guzmán took advantage of the internal crisis to gain ground within the cartel and take over more drug trafficking operations. In 1989, Flix Gallardo was arrested. While in prison and through a number of envoys, the drug lord called for a summit in Acapulco, Guerrero. In the conclave, Guzmán and others discussed the future of Mexico's drug trafficking and agreed to divide the territories previously owned by the Guadalajara cartel. Guzmán was specifically in charge of the drug corridors of Tecate, Baja California, and Mexicali and San Luis Rio Colorado, 2 border crossings that connect the states of Sonora and Baja California with the U.S. states of Arizona and California. When Flix Gallardo was arrested, Guzmán reportedly lived in Guadalajara, Jalisco for some time. One of his other centers of operation, however, was in the border city of Agua Prieta, Sonora, where he coordinated drug trafficking activities more closely. Guzmán had dozens of properties in various parts of the country. People he trusted purchased the properties for him and registered them under false names. Most of them were located in residential neighborhoods and served as stash houses for drugs, weapons, and cash. Guzmán also owned several ranches across Mexico, but most of them were located in the states of Sinaloa, Durango, Chihuahua, and Sonora, where locals working for the drug lord grew opium and marijuana. The first time Guzmán was detected by U.S. authorities for his involvement in organized crime was in 1987, when several protected witnesses testified in a U.S. court that Guzmán was in fact heading the Sinaloa Cartel. Another indictment alleged that Guzmán earned $100,000 for trafficking 70,000 pounds, roughly 31,750 kilograms, of cocaine and an unspecified amount of marijuana in a period of 3 years, in the border areas between Tecate and San Luis Rio, Colorado. Guzmán ordered his men to traffic most of the drugs overland, but also through a few aircraft, by using the so-called piecemeal strategy, in which traffickers kept drug quantities relatively low. Risks were reduced. Guzmán also pioneered the use of sophisticated underground tunnels to move drugs across the border and into the United States. Aside from pioneering the tunnels, Palma and Guzmán packed cocaine into chili pepper cans under the brand La Comadre before they were shipped to the U.S. by train. In return, the drug lords were paid through large suitcases filled with millions of dollars in cash. These suitcases were flown from the U.S. to Mexico City, where corrupt customs agents at the airport made sure the deliveries were not inspected. Large sums of that money were reportedly used as bribes for members of the Attorney General's office. Conflict with the Tijuana Cartel, 1989 to 1993 == When Flix Gallardo was arrested, the Tijuana corridor was handed over to the Arellano Flix brothers, Jesus Labra Aviles, alias El Chuy, and Javier Caro Payan, alias El Doctor, cousin of the former Guadalajara cartel leader Rafael Caro Quintero. In fears of a coup, however, Caro Payan fled to Canada and was later arrested. Guzmán and the rest of the Sinaloa cartel leaders consequently grew angry at the Arellano Flix clan about this. In 1989, Guzmán sent Armando Lopez, alias El Rayo, one of his most trusted men, to speak with the Arellano Flix clan in Tijuana. Before he had a chance to speak face-to-face with them, Lopez was killed by Ramon Arellano Flix. The corpse was disposed in the outskirts of the city and the Tijuana cartel ordered a hit on the remaining members of the Lopez family to prevent future reprisals. That same year, the Arellano Flix brothers sent the Venezuelan drug trafficker Enrique Rafael Clavel Moreno to infiltrate Palma's family and seduce his wife Guadalupe Serrano. After convincing her to withdraw $7 million from one of Palma's bank accounts in San Diego, California, Clavel beheaded her and sent her head to Palma in a box. It was known as the first beheading linked to the drug trade in Mexico. 2 weeks later, Clavel killed Palma's children, Hector, aged 5, and Natalie, aged 4, by throwing them off a bridge in Venezuela. Palma retaliated by sending his men to kill Clavel while he was in prison. In 1991, Ramon killed another Sinaloa cartel associate, Rigoberto Campos Salcido, alias El Rigo, and prompted bigger conflicts with Guzmán. In early 1992, a Tijuana cartel-affiliated and San Diego-based gang known as Calle Treinta kidnapped 6 of Guzmán's men in Tijuana, tortured them to attain information, and then shot them in the back of their heads. Their bodies were dumped on the outskirts of the city. Shortly after the attack, a car bomb exploded outside one of Guzmán's properties in Culiacán. No injuries were reported, but the drug lord became fully aware of the intended message. Guzmán and Palma struck back against the Arellano Flix brothers, Tijuana cartel, with 9 killings on 3 September 1992 in Iguala. Among the dead were lawyers and family members of Flix Gallardo, who was also believed to have orchestrated the attack against Palma's family. Mexico's Attorney General formed a special unit to look into the killings, but the investigation was called off after the unit found that Guzmán had paid off some of the top police officials in Mexico with $10 million, according to police reports and confessions of former police officers. In November 1992, gunmen of Arellano Flix attempted to kill Guzmán as he was traveling in a vehicle through the streets of Guadalajara. Ramon and at least 4 of his henchmen shot at the moving vehicle with AK-47 rifles, but the drug lord managed to escape unharmed. The attack forced Guzmán to leave Guadalajara and live under a false name under fears of future attacks. The shooting lasted for at least 8 minutes, and more than 1,000 rounds were fired by both Guzmán's and Arellano Flix gunmen. 6 people were killed in the shootout, but the Arellano Flix brothers were in the restroom when the raid started. started and reportedly escaped through an air conditioning duct before leaving the scene in one of their vehicles. On 9 and 10 December 1992, 4 alleged associates of Flix Gallardo were killed. The antagonism between Guzmán's Sinaloa Cartel and the Arellano Flix clan left several more dead and was accompanied by more violent events in the states of Baja California, Sonora, Sinaloa, Durango, Jalisco, Guerrero, Michoacán and Oaxaca. The war between both groups continued for 6 more months, yet none of their respective leaders was killed. In mid-1993, the Arellano Flix clan sent their top gunman on a final mission to kill Guzmán in Guadalajara, where he moved around frequently to avoid any possible attacks. Having no success, the Tijuana cartel hitmen decided to return to Baja California on the 24th of May 1993. As Francisco Javier was at the Guadalajara International Airport booking his flight to Tijuana, informant tips notified him that Guzmán was at the airport parking lot awaiting a flight to Puerto Vallarta. Having spotted the white Mercury Grand Marquis car where Guzmán was thought to be hiding, about 20 gunmen of the Tijuana cartel descended from their vehicles and opened fire at around 4:10 p.m. However, the drug lord was inside a green Buick sedan a short distance from the target. Inside the Mercury Grand Marquis was the Cardinal and Archbishop of Guadalajara Juan Jesus Posadas Ocampo, who died at the scene from 14 gunshot wounds. 6 other people, including the Cardinal's chauffeur, were caught in the crossfire and killed. Amidst the shootout and confusion, Guzmán escaped and headed to one of his safe houses in Bigambelias, a neighborhood 20 minutes away from the airport. Exodus and arrest The night the Cardinal was killed, Mexican President Carlos Salinas de Gortari flew to Guadalajara and condemned the attack, stating it was a criminal act that targeted innocent civilians, but he did not give any indications of the involvement of organized crime. The death of Cardinal Posadas Ocampo, a high-profile religious figure, outraged the Mexican public, the Catholic Church, and many politicians. The government responded by carrying out a massive manhunt to arrest the people involved in the shootout, and offered about $5 million bounties for each of them. Pictures of Guzmán's face, previously unknown to the public, started to appear in newspapers and television across Mexico. Fearing his capture, Guzmán fled to Tonala, Jalisco, where he reportedly owned a ranch. The drug lord then fled to Mexico City and stayed at a hotel for about 10 days. He met with one of his associates in an unknown location and handed him $200 million to provide for his family in case of his absence. He gave that same amount to another of his employees to make sure the Sinaloa cartel ran its day-to-day activities smoothly in case he was gone for some time. After obtaining a passport with the fake name of Jorge Ramos Perez, Guzmán was transported to the southern state of Chiapas by one of his trusted associates before leaving the country and settling in Guatemala on the 4th of June 1993. His plan was to move across Guatemala with his girlfriend Maria del Rocio del Villar Becerra and several of his bodyguards and settle in El Salvador. During his travel, Mexican and Guatemalan authorities had the drug lord on their radar. Guzmán had bribed a Guatemalan military official with $1.2 million in order to hide south of the Mexican border. The unnamed official, however, passed down information about Guzmán's whereabouts to law enforcement. On the 9th of June 1993, Guzmán was arrested by the Guatemalan army at a hotel near Tapachula, close to the Guatemala-Mexico border. He was extradited to Mexico 2 days later aboard a military airplane, where he was immediately taken to the Federal Social Readaptation Center No. 1, often referred to simply as La Palma or Altiplano, a maximum security prison in Almoloya de Juarez, state of Mexico. First arrest, 1993. Guzmán was captured for the first time in Guatemala on the 9th of June 1993, extradited to Mexico and sentenced to 20 years, 9 months in prison on charges of drug trafficking, criminal association and bribery. He was jailed at Federal Social Readaptation Center No. 1, a maximum security prison. On the 22nd of November 1995, he was transferred to the maximum security prison Federal Center for Social Rehabilitation No. 2, also known as Puente Grande, in Jalisco, after being convicted of 3 crimes: possession of firearms, drug trafficking and the murder of Cardinal Juan Jesus Posadas Ocampo. The charge would later be dismissed by another judge. He had been tried and sentenced inside the federal prison on the outskirts of Almoloya de Juarez, Mexico State. While he was in prison, Guzmán's drug empire and cartel continued to operate unabated, run by his brother, Arturo Guzmán Loera, known as El Pollo, with Guzmán himself still considered a major international drug trafficker by Mexico and the U.S. even while he was behind bars. Associates brought him suitcases of cash to bribe prison workers and allow the drug lord to maintain his opulent lifestyle even in prison, with prison guards acting like his servants. He met his longtime mistress and later Sinaloa associate, former police officer Zalima Hernandez, while in prison, where she was was serving time for armed robbery. Hernandez later controlled Sinaloa's expansion into Mexico City, but in 2008 her body was found in a trunk, carved with multiple Z's, signifying Los Zetas, Sinaloa's arch-rivals. Drug empire Guzman's Sinaloa Cartel, at the time of his arrest, was the wealthiest and most powerful of Mexico's drug cartels. It smuggles multi-ton cocaine shipments from Colombia through Mexico to the United States by air, sea and road, and has distribution cells throughout the U.S. The organization has also been involved in the production, smuggling and distribution of Mexican methamphetamine, marijuana, and heroin from Southeast Asia. When Palma was arrested by the Mexican army on the 23rd of June 1995, Guzmán took leadership of the cartel. Palma was later extradited to the United States, where he is in prison on charges of drug trafficking and conspiracy. After Guzmán's prison escape nearly a decade after his initial arrest, he and close associate Ismael Zambada Garcia became Mexico's undisputed top drug kingpins after the 2003 arrest of their rival Ociel Cardenas of the Gulf Cartel. Until Guzmán's arrest in 2014, he was considered the most powerful drug trafficker in the world by the United States Department of the Treasury. Guzmán also had another close associate, his trusted friend Ignacio Nacho Coronel Villarreal. His drug empire made him a billionaire, and he was ranked as the 10th richest man in Mexico and 1,140th in the world in 2011, with a net worth of roughly $1 billion. To assist his drug trafficking, the Sinaloa Cartel also built a shipping and transport empire. Guzmán has been referred to as the biggest drug lord of all time, and the U.S. DEA considered him the godfather of the drug world and strongly estimates he surpassed the influence and reach of Pablo Escobar. In 2013, the Chicago Crime Commission named Guzmán public enemy number 1 for the influence of his criminal network in Chicago. There is no evidence that Guzmán has ever been in that city. However, the last person to receive such notoriety was Al Capone in 1930. At the time of his 2014 arrest, Guzmán imported more drugs into the United States than anyone else. He took advantage of the power vacuum created by crackdowns on cartels in Colombia, gaining business and market share there as Colombia's own cartels were decimated. He took similar advantage of the situation when his rival cartels were brought down by an intense crackdown from the Mexican government, but the Sinaloa gang emerged largely unscathed. Methamphetamine After the fall of the Amezcua brothers, founders of the Colima cartel, in 1999 on methamphetamine trafficking charges, there was a demand for leadership throughout Mexico to coordinate methamphetamine shipments north. Guzmán saw an opportunity and seized it, easily arranging precursor shipments. Guzmán and Ismael Zambada Garcia, El Mayo, made use of their previous contacts on Mexico's Pacific coast. Importantly, for the first time, the Colombians would not have to be paid, they simply joined methamphetamine with cocaine shipments. This fact meant no additional money was needed for airplanes, pilots, boats and bribes. They used the existing infrastructure to pipeline the new product. Until this point, the Sinaloa Cartel had been a joint venture between Guzmán and Ismael Zambada Garcia. The methamphetamine business would be Guzmán's alone. He cultivated his own ties to China, Thailand and India to import the necessary precursor chemicals. Throughout the mountains of the states of Sinaloa, Durango, Jalisco, Michoacán and Nayarit, Guzmán constructed large methamphetamine laboratories and rapidly expanded his organization. His habit of moving from place to place allowed him to nurture contacts throughout the country. He was now operating in 17 of 31 Mexican states. With his business expanding, he placed his trusted friend Ignacio Coronel Villarreal in charge of methamphetamine production. This way Guzmán could continue being the boss of bosses. Coronel Villarreal proved so reliable in the Guzmán business that he became known as the Crystal King. First escape, runaway and manhunt, and second arrest First escape, 2001 While still in prison in Mexico, Guzmán was indicted in San Diego on U.S. charges of money laundering and importing tons of cocaine into California, along with his Sinaloa attorney Humberto Loya Castro, or Licenciado Perez, Lawyer Perez, who was charged with bribing Mexican officials on Sinaloa's behalf and making sure that any cartel members arrested were released from custody. After a ruling by the Supreme Court of Mexico made extradition between Mexico and the United States easier, Guzmán bribed guards to aid his escape. On the 19th of January 2001, Francisco El Chito Camberos Rivera, a prison guard, opened Guzmán's electronically operated cell door, and Guzmán got into a laundry cart that maintenance worker Javier Camberos rolled through several doors and eventually out the front door. He was then transported in the trunk of a car driven by Camberos out of the town. At a gas station, Camberos went inside, but when he came back, Guzmán was gone on foot into the night. According to officials, 78 people have been implicated in his escape plan. Camberos is in prison for his assistance in the escape. The police say Guzmán carefully masterminded his escape plan, wielding influence over almost everyone in the prison, including the facility's director, who is now in prison for aiding in the escape. One prison guard who came forward to report the situation at the prison was found dead years later, presumed to be killed by Guzmán. Guzmán allegedly had the prison guards on his payroll, smuggled contraband into the prison and received preferential treatment from the staff. In addition to the prison employee accomplices, police in Jalisco were paid off to ensure he had at least 24 hours to get out of the state and stay ahead of the military manhunt. The story told to the guards being bribed not to search the laundry cart was that Guzmán was smuggling gold, ostensibly extracted from rock at the inmate workshop, out of the prison. The escape allegedly cost Guzmán $2.5 million. First runaway and manhunt, 2001 to 2014 Mexican cartel wars. Since his 2001 escape from prison, Guzmán had been wanting to take over the Ciudad Juárez crossing points, which were under the control of the Carrillo Fuentes family of the Juárez cartel. Despite a high degree of mistrust between the two organizations, the Sinaloa and Juárez cartels had a working agreement at the time. Guzmán convened a meeting in Monterrey with Ismael Zambada Garcia, El Mayo, Juan José Esparragoza Moreno, El Azul, and Arturo Beltrán Leiva, and they discussed killing Rodolfo Carrillo Fuentes, who was in charge of the Juárez cartel at the time. On the 11th of September 2004, Rodolfo, his wife and two young children were visiting a Culiacán shopping mall. While leaving the mall, escorted by police commander Pedro Pérez López, the family was ambushed by members of Los Negros, assassins for the Sinaloa Cartel. Rodolfo and his wife were killed. The policemen survived. This now meant the city would no longer be controlled only by the Carrillo Fuentes family. Instead, the city found itself as the front line in the Mexican drug war and would see homicides skyrocket as rival cartels fought for control. With this act, Guzmán was the first to break the non-aggression pact the major cartels had agreed to, setting in motion the fighting between cartels for drug routes that has claimed more than 60,000 lives since December 2006. When Mexican President Felipe Calderón took office in December 2006, he announced a crackdown on cartels by the Mexican military to stem the increasing violence. After 4 years, the additional efforts had not slowed the flow of drugs or the killings tied to the drug war. Sinaloa's rival cartels saw their leaders killed and syndicates dismantled by the crackdown, but the Sinaloa gang was relatively unaffected and took over the rival gangs' territories, including the coveted Ciudad Juárez-El Paso corridor. In the wake of the power shifts, relations to the Beltrán Leiva cartel, a Newsweek investigation alleges that one of Guzmán's techniques for maintaining his dominance among cartels included giving information to the DEA and U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement that led to the arrests of his enemies in the Juárez cartel, in addition to information that led to the arrests of some of the top Sinaloa leaders. This became a key factor influencing the break between the Sinaloa cartel and the Beltrán Leiva brothers, 5 brothers who served as Guzmán's top lieutenants, primarily working for the cartel in the northern region of Sinaloa. Sinaloa lawyer Loya Castro, who like Guzmán had been wanted on federal charges in the United States since 1993, voluntarily approached the DEA offering them information in 1998, eventually signing paperwork as a formal informant in 2005, and his U.S. indictment was thrown out in 2008. Guzmán had been voicing concerns with Alfredo Beltrán's lifestyle and high-profile actions for some time before his arrest. After El Mochomo's arrest, authorities said he was in charge of 2 hit squads, money laundering, transporting drugs and bribing officials. That high-profile arrest was followed by the arrest of 11 Beltrán Leiva hit squad members in Mexico City, with police noting that the arrests were the first evidence that Sinaloa had expanded into the capital city. United States Ambassador to Mexico Tony Garza called the arrests a significant victory in the drug war. With Alfredo in custody, his brother Arturo Beltrán Leiva took over as the brothers' top commander, but he was killed in a shootout with Mexican Marines the next year. Whether Guzmán was responsible for Alfredo Beltrán's arrest is not known. However, the Beltrán Leivas and their allies suspected he was behind it, and after Alfredo Beltrán's arrest, a formal war was declared. An attempt on the life of cartel head Zambada's son Vicente Zambada Niebla, El Vincentillo, was made just hours after the declaration. Dozens of killings followed in retaliation for that attempt. The Beltrán Leiva brothers ordered the assassination of Guzmán's son, Edgar Guzmán López, on the 8th of May 2008, in Culiacán, Joaqu, which brought massive retaliation from Guzmán. They were also fighting over the allegiance of the Flores brothers, Margarito and Pedro, leaders of a major, highly lucrative cell in Chicago that distributed over 2 tons of cocaine every month. The Mexican military claims that Guzmán and the Beltran Leyva brothers were at odds over Guzmán's relationship with the Valencia brothers in Michoacán. Following the killing of Guzmán's son Edgar, violence increased. From the 8th of May through the end of the month, over 116 people were murdered in Culiacán, 26 of them police officers. In June 2008, over 128 were killed. In July, 143 were slain. Additional 2,000 troops were deployed to the area, but it failed to stop the turf war. The wave of violence spread to other cities like Guamuchil, Guasave and Mazatlan. However, the Beltran Leyva brothers were doing some double dealing of their own. Arturo and Alfredo had met with top members of Los Zetas in Cuernavaca, where they agreed to form an alliance to fill the power vacuum. They would not necessarily go after the main strongholds, such as the Sinaloa and Gulf Cartel. Instead, they would seek control of southern states like Guerrero, where the Beltran Leyvas already had a big stake, Oaxaca, Yucatan and Quintana Roo. They worked their way into the center of the country, where no single group had control. The Beltran Leyva organization allied with the Gulf Cartel and its hit squad Los Zetas against Sinaloa. The split was officially recognized by the U.S. government on the 30th of May 2008. On that day, it recognized the Beltran Leyva brothers as leaders of their own cartel. First manhunt. Guzmán was notable among drug lords for his longevity and evasion of authorities, assisted by alleged bribes to federal, state and local Mexican officials. Despite the progress made in arresting others in the aftermath of Guzmán's escape, including a handful of his top logistics and security men, the huge military and federal police manhunt failed to capture Guzmán for years. In the years between his escape and capture, he was Mexico's most wanted man. His elusiveness from law enforcement made him a near-legendary figure in Mexico's narcotics folklore. Stories abounded that Guzmán sometimes strolled into restaurants, his bodyguards confiscating people's cell phones, he ate his meal, and then left after paying everyone's tab. Rumors circulated of Guzmán being seen in different parts of Mexico and abroad. For more than 13 years, Mexican security forces coordinated many operatives to rearrest him, but their efforts were largely in vain because Guzmán appeared to be steps ahead from his captors. Although his whereabouts were unknown, the authorities thought that he was likely hiding in the Golden Triangle, Spanish, Triangulo Dorado, an area that encompasses parts of Sinaloa, Durango, and Chihuahua in the Sierra Madre region. The region is a major producer of marijuana and opium poppy in Mexico, and its remoteness from the urban areas makes it an attractive territory for the production of synthetic drugs in clandestine laboratories and for its mountains that offer potential hideouts. Guzmán reportedly commanded a sophisticated security circle of at least 300 informants and gunmen resembling the manpower equivalent to those of a head of state. His inner circle would help him move around through several isolated ranches in the mountainous area and avoid capture. He usually escaped from law enforcement using armored cars, aircraft, and all-terrain vehicles, and was known to employ sophisticated communications gadgetry and counter-espionage practices. Since many of these locations in the Golden Triangle can only be reached over single-track dirt roads, local residents easily detected the arrival of law enforcement or any outsiders. Their distrust towards non-residents and their aversion towards the government, alongside a combination of bribery and intimidation, helped keep the locals loyal to Guzmán and the Sinaloa Cartel in the area. In addition, his gunmen reportedly carried surface-to-air missiles that may bring down aircraft in the area. Second arrest, 2014 Although Guzmán had long hidden successfully in remote areas of the Sierra Madre Mountains, the arrested members of his security team told the military he had begun venturing out to Culiacán and the beach town of Mazatlan. A week before his capture, Guzmán and Zambada were reported to have attended a family reunion in Sinaloa. The Mexican military followed the bodyguards' tips to Guzmán's former wife's house, but they had trouble ramming the steel-reinforced front door, which allowed Guzmán to escape through a system of secret tunnels that connected 6 houses, eventually moving south to Mazatlan. He had planned to stay a few days in Mazatlan to see his twin baby daughters before retreating to the mountains. On the 22nd of February 2014, at around 6:40 a.m., Mexican authorities arrested Guzmán at a hotel in a beachfront area in Mazatlan, following an operation by the Mexican Navy, with joint intelligence agents from the DEA and the U.S. Marshals Service. A few days before his capture, Mexican authorities had been raiding several properties owned by members of the Sinaloa Cartel who were close to Guzmán throughout the state of Sinaloa. The operation that led to his capture started at 3:45 a.m., when 10 pickup trucks of the Mexican Navy carrying over 65 Marines made their way to the resort area. Guzmán was hiding at the Miramar condominiums, located at 608 on Avenida de Mar. Mexican and U.S. federal agents had leads that the drug lord had been at that location for at least 2 days, and that he was staying on the condominium's 4th floor, in room 401. When the Mexican authorities arrived at the location, they quickly subdued Carlos Manuel Ramirez, one of Guzmán's bodyguards, before quietly making their way to the 4th floor by the elevators and stairs. Once they were at Guzmán's front door, they broke into the apartment and stormed the 2 rooms it had. In one of the rooms was Guzmán, lying in bed with his wife, former beauty queen Emma Coronel Aspero. Their 2 daughters were reported to have been at the condominium during the arrest. Guzmán tried to resist arrest physically, but he did not attempt to grab a rifle he had close to him. Amid the quarrel with the Marines, the drug lord was hit 4 times. By 6:40 a.m., he was arrested, taken to the ground floor, and walked to the condominium's parking lot, where the first photos of his capture were taken. His identity was confirmed through a fingerprint examination immediately following his capture. He was then flown to Mexico City, the country's capital, for formal identification. According to the Mexican government, no shots were fired during the operation. Guzmán was presented in front of cameras during a press conference at the Mexico City International Airport that afternoon, and then he was transferred to the Federal Social Rehabilitation Center No. 1, a maximum security prison in Almoloya de Juarez, State of Mexico, on a federal police Black Hawk helicopter. The helicopter was escorted by 2 Navy helicopters and 1 from the Mexican Air Force. Surveillance inside the penitentiary and surrounding areas was increased by a large contingent of law enforcement. Reactions. Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto confirmed the arrest through Twitter and congratulated the Secretariat of National Defense, SEDENA, Secretariat of the Navy, SEMAR, Office of the General Prosecutor, PGR, the Federal Police, and the Centro de Investigación y Seguridad Nacional, CISEN, for Guzmán's capture. In the United States, Attorney General Eric Holder said Guzmán had caused death and destruction of millions of lives across the globe and called the arrest a landmark achievement, and a victory for the citizens of both Mexico and the United States. Colombia's President Juan Manuel Santos telephoned Peña Nieto and congratulated him for the arrest of Guzmán, highlighting its importance in the international efforts against drug trafficking. Colombia's Defense Minister, Juan Carlos Pinzon, congratulated Mexico on Guzmán's arrest and stated that his capture contributes to eradicate this crime, drug trafficking, in the region. The Guatemalan President Otto Pérez Molina congratulated the Mexican government for the arrest. Costa Rica's President Laura Chinchilla congratulated the Mexican government through Twitter for the capture too. The French government extended its congratulations on the 24th of February and supported the Mexican security forces in their combat against organized crime. News of Guzmán's capture made it to the headlines of many news outlets across the U.S., Latin America, and Europe. On Twitter, Mexico and Guzmán's capture were trending topics throughout most of the 22nd of February 2014. Bob Nardoza, a spokesman for the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District Court for the Eastern District of New York, announced that U.S. authorities plan to seek the extradition of Guzmán for several cases pending against him in New York and other United States jurisdictions. Charges and imprisonment. Guzmán was imprisoned in Area 20, Hallway 1, on the 22nd of February 2014. The area where he lived was highly restricted, the cells do not have any windows, inmates are not allowed to interact with one another, and they are not permitted to contact their family members. His cell was close to those of José Jorge Balderas, alias LJJ, former lieutenant of the Beltran Leyva cartel, and Jaime González Duran, alias El Hummer, a former leader of Los Zetas drug cartel. Miguel Angel Guzmán Lora, one of his brothers, was in one of the other units. Guzmán was alone in his cell, and had one bed, one shower, and a single toilet. His lawyer was Oscar Quirart. Guzmán was allowed to receive visits from his family members every 9 days from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., if approved by a judge, and was granted by law to receive MXN $638, about $48, every month to buy products for personal hygiene. He lived under 23 hours of solitary confinement with 1 hour of outdoor exposure. He was only allowed to speak with people during his judicial hearings. The prison guards that secured his cell were not allowed to speak with him. Unlike the other inmates, Guzmán was prohibited from practicing sport or cultural activities. These conditions were court-approved and could only be changed if a federal judge decided to amend them. On the 24th of February, the Mexican government formally charged Guzmán for drug trafficking, a process that slowed down his possible extradition to the U.S. The decision to initially file only one charge against him showed that the Mexican government was working on gathering more formal charges against Guzmán, and possibly including the charges he faced before his escape from prison in 2001. The kingpin also faces charges in at least 7 U.S. jurisdictions, and U.S. officials filed for his extradition. Guzmán was initially granted an injunction preventing immediate extradition to the United States. On the 25th of February, a Mexican federal judge set the trial in motion for drug-related and organized crime charges. On the 4th of March 2014, a Mexican federal court issued a formal charge against Guzmán for his involvement in organized crime. On the 5th of March 2014, a Mexico City federal court rejected Guzmán's injunction against extradition to the U.S. on the grounds that the U.S. officials had not formally requested his extradition from Mexico. The court said that if the U.S. files a request in the future, Guzmán can petition for another injunction. The court had until the 9th of April 2014 to issue a formal declaration of the injunction's rejection, and Guzmán's lawyers could appeal the court's decision in the meantime. The same day that the injunction was rejected, another federal court issued formal charges against Guzmán, totaling up to 5 different Mexican federal courts where he is wanted for drug trafficking and organized crime charges. The court explained that although Guzmán faces charges in several different courts, he cannot be sentenced for the same crime twice because that would violate Article 23 of the Constitution of Mexico. On the 17th of April 2014, the Attorney General of Mexico, Jesus Murillo Karam, said that Mexico had no intention of extraditing Guzmán to the U.S. even if a formal request were to be presented. He said he wished to see Guzmán face charges in Mexico, and expressed his disagreement with how the U.S. cuts deals with extradited Mexican criminals by reducing their sentences, as in Vicente Zambada Nibla's case, in exchange for information. On the 16th of July 2014, Guzmán reportedly helped organize a 5-day hunger strike in the prison in cooperation with inmate and former drug lord Edgar Valdez Villarreal, alias La Barbie. Over 1,000 prisoners reportedly participated in the protest and complained of the prison's poor hygiene, food, and medical treatment. The Mexican government confirmed that the strike took place and that the prisoners' demands were satisfied, but denied that Guzmán or Valdez Villarreal were involved in it given their status as prisoners in solitary confinement. On the 25th of September 2014, Guzmán and his former business partner Zambada were indicted by the United States District Court for the Eastern District of New York in Brooklyn. According to the court documents, both of them conspired to kill Mexican law enforcement officers, government officials, and members of the Mexican armed forces. The court alleged that Guzmán used professional assassins to carry out hundreds of acts of violence, including murders, assaults, kidnappings, assassinations and acts of torture. In addition, it alleged that he oversaw a drug trafficking empire that transported multi-ton shipments of narcotics from South America, through Central America and Mexico, and then to the U.S., and that his network was facilitated by corrupt law enforcement and public officials. It also alleged that Guzmán laundered more than $14 billion in drug proceeds along with several other high-ranking drug lords. On the 11th of November 2014, a federal court in Sinaloa granted Guzmán an injunction for weaponry charges after the judge determined that the arrest was not carried out the way the Mexican Navy reported it. According to law enforcement, the Navy apprehended Guzmán after they received an anonymous tip on an armed individual in the hotel where he was staying. However, no evidence of the anonymous tip was provided. The judge also determined that the investigations leading to his arrest were not presented in court. He determined that law enforcement's version of the arrest had several irregularities because the Navy did not have a raid warrant when they entered the premises and arrested Guzmán, when he was not the subject matter of the anonymous tip in the first place. The decision of his defense was made after Attorney General Murillo Karam said at a press conference that the U.S. was pushing to formally request his extradition. Murillo Karam said that the Mexican government would process the request when they deemed it appropriate. He asked for a second injunction preventing his extradition on the 26th of January. Mexico City Federal Judge Fabricio Villegas asked federal authorities to confirm in 24 hours if there was a pending extradition request against Guzmán. In a press conference the following day, Murillo Karam said that he was expecting a request from Washington, but said that they would not extradite him until he faces charges and completes his sentences in Mexico. If all the charges are added up, Guzmán may receive a sentence between 300 and 400 years. Second escape, runaway and manhunt, and third arrest second escape, 2015 On the 11th of July 2015, Guzmán escaped from Federal Social Readaptation Center No. 1, a maximum security prison. After receiving medication, Guzmán was last seen by security cameras at 20:52 hours near the shower area in his cell. The shower area was the only part of his cell that was not visible through the security camera. After the guards did not see him for 25 minutes on surveillance video, personnel went looking for him. When they reached his cell, Guzmán was gone. It was discovered he had escaped through a tunnel leading from the shower area to a house construction site 1.5 kilometers (0.93 miles) away in a Santa Juanita neighborhood. The tunnel lay 10 meters (33 feet) deep underground, and Guzmán used a ladder to climb to the bottom. The tunnel was 1.7 meters (5 feet 7 in) tall and 75 centimeters (30 in width. It was equipped with artificial light, air ducts, and high-quality construction materials. In addition, a motorcycle was found in the tunnel, which authorities think was used to transport materials and possibly Guzmán himself. Although guards discovered that Guzmán had escaped at 21:22 hours, a red alert, which locks down the prison and alerts a nearby military garrison, was only activated at midnight. Second runaway and manhunt, 2014 to 2016 Initial Mexican reactions. The escape of Guzmán triggered a wide-range manhunt. According to Mexico's National Security Commissioner Monte Alejandro Rabito Garcia, the manhunt was instituted immediately in the surrounding area by putting up several checkpoints and air searches by helicopter. The entire prison was put on lockdown and no one was allowed to enter or leave. The search was then extended to other federal entities: Mexico City, the State of Mexico, Morelos, Puebla, Guerrero, Michoacán, Querétaro, Hidalgo and Tlaxcala. However, most of the military officers involved in the search were sent to the state of Mexico. The Mexican government also issued an international warning to prevent Guzmán from escaping the country through airports, border checkpoints, or ports. Interpol and other security organizations were alerted to the possibility of him escaping into another country. Flights at the Toluca International Airport were canceled, while soldiers occupied parts of Mexico City International Airport. Out of the 120 employees that were working at the prison that night, 18 employees from the prison were initially detained for questioning. Those 18 worked in the area of Guzmán's cell. By the afternoon, a total of 31 people had been called in for questioning. The director of the prison, Valentin Cardenas Lerma, was among those detained. When the news of the escape broke, President Peña Nieto was heading to a state visit in France along with several top officials from his cabinet and many others. The Secretary of the Interior Miguel Angel Osorio Chong, who was already in France waiting for them, returned to Mexico after learning of Guzmán's prison break. Peña Nieto returned to Mexico on the 17th of July. In a press conference, Peña Nieto said he was shocked by Guzmán's escape, and promised that the government would carry out an intensive investigation to see if officials had collaborated in the prison break. In addition, he claimed that Guzmán's escape was an affront to the Mexican government, and that they would not spare any resources in trying to recapture him. Peña Nieto, however, was severely criticized for the incident, and media outlets pointed out that this incident was among the administration's most embarrassing episodes. Critics stated that Guzmán's escape highlighted the high levels of corruption within the government, and questioned the government's ability to combat the country's organized crime groups. Manhunt and investigation. On the 13th of July 2015, Osorio Chong met with members of the cabinet that specialize in security and law enforcement intelligence to discuss the escape of Guzmán, and scheduled a press conference that day. The objective of the meeting and the conference was to analyze the actions the government employed to recapture him. Among them were Rabito Garcia, Arly Gomez Gonzalez, the Attorney General of Mexico, and Eugenio Imas Gispert, head of the Center for Research and National Security. At the press conference, the government placed a $60 million MXN bounty, approximately $3.8 million, for information that leads to Guzmán's arrest. A number of officials were indicted. Of these, 3 were police officers employed within the Division of Intelligence, and another 2 were employed by CISEN, Colombian assistants. Officials of the Mexican government appealed to 3 Colombian police retired generals for assistance in the closure of issues relating to Guzmán, according to a report dated to the 1st of August 2015. Among them is Rosso Jose Serrano, a decorated officer and one of the masterminds behind the dismantling of the Cali Cartel and Medellin Cartel, and Luis Enrique Montenegro, protagonist in the arrests of Miguel and Gilberto Rodriguez Orihuela. After the third capture of Guzman, it was made clear that the government of Colombia had sent a team of 12 officials to assist the Mexican authorities on tracking down Guzman. Third arrest, 2016 According to the official report published by Mexican Navy, citizens reported armed people in a house at the coastal city of Los Mochis in northern Sinaloa, which was then placed under surveillance for 1 month. Monitored communications indicated the home was being prepared for the arrival of grandma or aunt, which authorities suspected was code for a high-priority potential target. The federal police captured Guzman, along with cartel lieutenant Oscar Ivan Gastelum Aguilar, El Cholo, following a shootout with the Marines. During the raid, codenamed Operation Black Swan, Guzman and Gastelum managed to briefly escape through a secret tunnel, hidden behind a mirror in a closet, that led to the city's sewer system and ran for about 1.5 kilometers. They then surfaced and stole a vehicle at gunpoint. A statewide alert was issued for the stolen vehicle, and the federal police located and intercepted it about 20 kilometers south of Los Mochis near a town called Juan José Rios. Guzman attempted to bribe the officers with offers of cash, properties, and offers of jobs. When the officers refused, Guzman told them, "You are all going to die." The 4 police officers sent pictures of Guzman to their superiors, who were tipped that 40 assassins were on their way to free Guzman. To avoid this counter-attack by cartel members, the policemen were told to take their prisoners to a motel on the outskirts of town to wait for reinforcements, and later, handed over the prisoners to the Marines. They were subsequently taken to Los Mochis Airport for transport to Mexico City, where Guzman was presented to the press at the Mexico City airport and then flown by a Navy helicopter to the same maximum security prison from which he escaped in July 2015. During the raid, 5 gunmen were killed, 6 others arrested, and 1 Marine was wounded. The Mexican Navy said that they found 2 armored cars, 8 assault rifles, including 2 Barrett M82 sniper rifles, 2 M16 rifles with grenade launchers and a loaded rocket-propelled grenade launcher. Mexican authorities raided 18 known Guzman residences in the months before his capture. Guzman had a close call in early October 2015, several days after meeting with American actor Sean Penn and Mexican actress Kate Del Castillo. On the 2nd of October, Penn and Del Castillo visited Guzman for 7 hours at his hideout in the mountains, with Penn interviewing the fugitive for Rolling Stone magazine. Guzman, who had never before acknowledged his drug trafficking to a journalist, told Penn he had a fleet of submarines, airplanes, trucks and boats, and that he supplied more heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine and marijuana than anybody else in the world. An unnamed Mexican official confirmed that Penn's meeting helped authorities locate Guzman, with cell phone interceptions and information from American authorities directing Mexican Marines to a ranch near Tamazula, Durango, in the Sierra Madre Mountains in western Mexico. The raid on the ranch was met with heavy gunfire and Guzman was able to flee. The Attorney General of Acute Zico declared that El Chapo ran away through a gully and, although he was found by a helicopter, he was with 2 women and a girl, and it was decided not to shoot. The 2 women were later revealed to be Guzman's personal chefs, who had traveled with him to multiple safe houses. At one point, Guzman reportedly carried a child on his arms, obscuring himself as a target. Reactions. Secretary of the Interior Miguel Angel Osorio Chong was hosting a reunion with Mexico's ambassadors and consuls when he received a notice from the president on Guzman's capture. He returned a few moments later with Secretary of National Defense Salvador Cienfuegos Zepeda, Secretary of Navy Vidal Francisco Cimarron Sanz, and Secretary of Foreign Affairs Claudia Ruiz Massieu. Osorio Chong then announced the capture to the diplomats by reading the president's tweet, which resulted in applause and chants of "Viva Acute Zico, Viva el Presidente Peña, and Viva las Fuerzas Armadas, long live Mexico, long live President Peña, long live our military forces." This was followed by a spontaneous rendition of the national anthem by the crowd. Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos congratulated Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto for the capture of Guzman. Loretta Lynch, United States Attorney General, praised Mexican authorities who have worked tirelessly in recent months to bring Guzman to justice. United States versus Guzman, et al. Extradition proceedings. A renewed process of extradition to the United States was formally launched by Mexico 2 days after Guzman was recaptured from his third escape from custody. Guzman's lawyers mounted numerous and creative injunctions to defend against extradition, and the process was expected to take from 1 to 6 years. President Peña Nieto did not have the authority to issue an executive order to immediately extradite Guzman without due process. Also, a critical requirement for extradition is that the U.S. must guarantee they will not use the death penalty against Guzman if found guilty of homicide charges. On the 2nd of March 2016, Guzman's lawyer stated that Guzman requested extradition to the United States so he could receive better treatment in prison. Guzman is wanted in Chicago, San Diego, New York City, New Hampshire, Miami and Texas, in addition to the indictments in at least 7 different U.S. federal courts. Charges in the United States include conspiracy to import and possess with intent to distribute cocaine, conspiracy association, organized crime against health, money laundering, homicide and possession of firearms. Guzman was transferred on the 5th of May 2016 to a prison near Ciudad Juarez, near the border with Texas. At that point, Mexico expected to extradite Guzman to the United States by February 2017. On October 17, Vicente Antonio Bermudez Zacarias, a federal judge based in the state of Mexico, was assassinated while jogging near Mexico City. Bermudez Zacarias had been involved in Guzman's extradition proceedings. On January 19, 2017, Guzman was extradited to the U.S. to face charges related to running the Sinaloa Cartel. Guzman was housed at the maximum security wing of the Metropolitan Correctional Center, New York, located in Manhattan, New York, while he awaited trial. Legal proceedings in United States District Court. On January 20, 2017, Guzman pled not guilty to a 17-count indictment in the United States District Court in New York. Guzman was charged in 6 separate U.S. indictments. The charges include money laundering, drug trafficking, kidnapping and murder in Chicago, Miami, New York and other cities. Then U.S. Attorney General Sally Yates called him the alleged leader of a multi-billion-dollar, multinational criminal enterprise that funneled drugs onto our streets and violence and misery into our communities. Guzman, during his court appearance in the Eastern District of New York, pled not guilty to all of the charges and waived his right for all of them to be read aloud in court. Guzman, who does not speak English, used a translator at the hearing. He was represented by 2 federal public defenders at his arraignment hearing. Personal life and family involvement in criminal activities. Guzman's family is heavily involved in drug trafficking, with several members killed by Sinaloa's arch-rival cartels Los Zetas and the Beltran Leyva organization, including his brother and one of his sons. In 1977, Guzman married Alejandrina Maria Salazar Hernandez in a small ceremony in the town of Jesus Maria, Sinaloa. They had at least 3 children, Cesar, Ivan Archivaldo and Jesus Alfredo. He set them up in a ranch home in Jesus Maria. When he was 30 years old, El Chapo had fallen in love with a bank clerk Estela Peña of Nayarit whom he kidnapped and had sexual relations with. They eventually married each other. In the mid-1980s, Guzman remarried, this time to Griselda Lopez Perez, with whom he had 4 more children, Edgar, JoaquíN, Ovidio and Griselda Guadalupe. Guzman's sons would follow him into the drug business. Lopez Perez was arrested in 2010 in Culiacán. In November 2007, Guzman married 18-year-old beauty queen Emma Coronel Aspero, the daughter of one of his top deputies, INE Acute S. Coronel Barreras, in Canelas, Durango. In August 2011, she gave birth to twin girls, Maria Joaquina and Emily Guadalupe, in a Los Angeles, California, county hospital. On the 1st of May 2013, Guzman's father-in-law INE Acute S. Coronel Barreras was captured by Mexican authorities in Agua Prieta, Sonora, with no gunfire exchanged. U.S. authorities believe that Coronel Barreras was a key operative of the Sinaloa Cartel who grew and smuggled marijuana through the Arizona border area. On the 15th of February 2005, his son Ivan Archivaldo, known as El Chapita, was arrested in Guadalajara on money laundering charges. He was sentenced to 5 years in a federal prison, but released in April 2008 after a Mexican federal judge, Jesus Guadalupe Luna, ruled that there was no proof his cash came from drugs other than that he was a drug lord's son. Luna and another judge were later suspended on suspicion of unspecified irregularities in their decisions, including Luna's decision to release El Chapita. Guzman's son Edgar Guzman Lopez died after a 2008 ambush in a shopping center parking lot in Culiacán in Sinaloa. Afterwards, police found more than 500 AK-47 bullet casings, 7.62 x 39 mm, at the scene. Guzman's brother Arturo, or El Pollo, was killed in prison in 2004. The Treasury Department described Salazar as Guzman's wife in its sanction against her, and described Guzman as her husband. The month before, the U.S. Treasury Department announced sanctions against Guzman's sons Ivan Guzman Salazar and Ovidio Guzman Lopez under the Kingpin Act. Guzman's second wife, Griselda Lopez Perez, was also sanctioned by the U.S. under the Kingpin Act and also described as Guzman's wife. Jesus Guzmán Salazar was reported to have been detained by Mexican Marines in an early morning raid in the western state of Jalisco on the 21st of June 2012. Months later, however, the Mexican Attorney General's office announced the Marines had arrested the wrong man and that the man captured was actually Flix Beltran Leon, who said he was a used car dealer, not the drug lord's son. U.S. and Mexican authorities blamed each other for providing the inaccurate information that led to the arrest. In 2012, Alejandrina Giselle Guzmán Salazar, a 31-year-old pregnant physician and Mexican citizen from Guadalajara, was said to have claimed she was Guzman's daughter as she crossed the U.S. border into San Diego. She was arrested on fraud charges for entering the country with a false visa. Unnamed officials said the woman was the daughter of Maria Alejandrina Salazar Hernandez but did not appear to be a major figure in the cartel. She had planned to meet the father of her child in Los Angeles and give birth in the United States. On the night of the 17th of June 2012, Obed Cano Zepeda, a nephew of Guzmán, was gunned down by unknown assailants at his home in the state capital of Culiacan while hosting a Father's Day celebration. The gunmen, who were reportedly carrying AK-47 rifles, also killed two other guests and left one seriously injured. Obed was a brother of Luis Alberto Cano Zepeda, alias El Blanco, a nephew of Guzmán who worked as a pilot drug transporter for the Sinaloa Cartel. Nonetheless, he was arrested by the Mexican military in August 2006. Insight Crime notes that the murder of Obed may have been a retaliation attack by Los Zetas for Guzmán's incursions into their territory or a brutal campaign heralding Los Zetas' presence in Sinaloa. In popular culture Several Mexican narco ballads narrate some of the exploits of Guzmán and his organization. Some American artists have also made songs with references to El Chapo, such as the rappers Uncle Murda, Skrillex, YG, Gucci Mane and Jason the Game Taylor. Rap artist 2 Chainz made a song dedicated to Guzmán, called El Chapo Jr. In 2017, Netflix and Univision began a co-production on a series, El Chapo, about the life of Guzmán. The series premiered on Sunday, April 23 at 8 p.m., 7 on Univision and was followed by a 20-minute Facebook Live after show entitled, El Chapo Ilimitada. See also List of Mexico's 37 most wanted drug lords. The world's 10 most wanted. References Bibliography External links JoaquíN Guzmán Loera's profile at Forbes. JoaquíN Guzmán Loera's profile and wanted poster from the DIA. JoaquíN Guzmán Loera's profile at the Interpol. JoaquíN Guzmán Loera's profile at the Chicago Crime Commission. JoaquíN Guzmán Loera's profile at the United States Department of State.